Bonjour tout le monde, c'est moi Charlotte et aujourd'hui je vous parle des pronoms compléments d'objets indirects français. En anglais, ça veut dire indirect object pronouns. So in my last video we looked at direct object pronouns and these actually look very, very similar. So if you've seen my previous video, don't be surprised that some of these, most of them, 4 of the 6 forms are actually the same. So that's me, te, nous and vous. But the exceptions are the third person singular and plural forms. So let's have a look at what they are and when you use them. Okay, so let me just show you what these actually are. Me, te, lui, nous, vous and leur. Okay, so if these look similar or familiar, that's because you have seen them before and they're very, very common in French. So a pronoun replaces a noun or a thing. I'll show you when these are used in a moment, but I'm just going to show you what they replace in French. So à, moi, to me, à, toi, à, lui. So if you're not sure, that word lui can mean him. Here it means to him or to her, but just on its own it normally means him. À elle, à nous, à vous, à eux. Now that's a bit difficult to say, à eux, but these words should be getting more and more familiar with you, for you. So there's not that much room in this part of my office, but c'est la vie, c'est pas grave. So when you see me, te, lui, nous, vous, and leur, and when you hear me say them in this video, this is probably what they're replacing. By the way, just excuse my hand. I scalded my hand earlier this week, so that's what that is. It's a lot better now. À moi, à toi, à lui, à elle, etc. So what we have here is the preposition à, which means in this case to, and then moi, which is the pronoun which means me. So for example, vous parlez à moi. Vous parlez à moi. You are speaking to me. Vous écrivez une lettre à moi. You are writing a letter to me. Let's have a think. Vous expliquez le problème à moi. You are explaining the problem to me. So all these verbs, parler, expliquer, envoyer, often verbs of communication actually, these verbs tend to be followed by the preposition à, to write to someone, to send something to someone, to explain something to someone. It happens to be the same in English that we have the preposition to, but in French, expliquer à, parler à or avec, montrer quelque chose à quelqu'un, demander à quelqu'un de faire quelque chose. What other verbs do we have that are followed by à? I have some on my handout, which I should be able to just find here. In fact, it's that one. Other verbs. Donner à, to give something to someone. Offrir à, to offer something to someone. Raconter à, or dire à, so that means to tell, as in to tell a story to someone, or tell something to someone. Dire can translate into English as to say to or to tell someone. Okay, so if you're saying to say something to someone, to say or to tell, in English you just tell someone. So the verb to tell someone something, to tell isn't followed by the preposition to. Tell something to someone. You could say it, but with the verb to say, I said something to him, then it is followed by the preposition. So it doesn't always work, depending on the way that you translate a French verb into English, it doesn't always have the same preposition as in French. So that's something to be aware of. But anyway, that's by the by. So here we've got, for example, vous expliquez à moi. Okay, I think that's what I was saying. Vous parlez à moi. Vous écrivez à moi. All of those sentences can be shortened down using the pronoun me. So, vous parlez à moi can be replaced by vous me parlez. You're explaining the problem to me can be reduced down to vous m'expliquez le problème. So let me show you what I mean. Vous expliquez le problème à moi. Vous expliquez le problème à moi. You are explaining the problem to me. You are explaining the problem to me. So this à moi here, we're going to replace with the pronoun me. Okay, so that is something that's what we're replacing. And where we put it in the sentence is before the verb. So there's the verb expliquer. So me in front of expliquer becomes M apostrophe. M'expliquer. Okay, so that's something that happens when you use these pronouns. You have to remember where they go, but they might be in front of a vowel, right? So if they're in front of a verb that begins with a vowel, then it's going to be M apostrophe in the me form and T apostrophe in the T form. So I'll show you what I mean. J'explique le problème à toi. Everything's too small, I keep hitting everything. J'explique le problème à toi. I'm explaining the problem to you. So if I want to say that sentence without saying à toi, I can say je t'explique le problème. Je t'explique le problème. Okay, I'll do that right now. Let me show you what I mean. Je t'explique. So here we've got this verb expliquer. And because, I'll show you now. So, je t'explique le problème. Je t'explique le problème. Or I could say je vous explique le problème. Or je lui explique le problème. Je leur explique, oh, excusez-moi, je leur explique le problème. So, what I'm doing here is I've got the sentence, and here in front of the verb I'm putting the pronoun. Te is short for, or T apostrophe is short for te, which replaces à toi. So let's have a think. Let me find the handout, which is what I'll be sending to my club members later today. So here I've got some example sentences where you use these pronouns, these indirect object pronouns, to replace a pronoun in the sentence. So the pronoun that we're replacing is often preceded by the preposition à. However, there are some examples where in the full form you would say, for example, pour quelqu'un. So instead of using to someone, you would use the preposition for someone. For example, j'achète des fleurs pour Sarah. J'achète les fleurs ou des fleurs pour Sarah. I'm buying flowers or some flowers for Sarah. Je lui achète des fleurs. Je lui achète des fleurs. So if I'm buying some flowers for Sarah, for her, then I can replace pour elle with lui. Je lui achète des fleurs. Je lui achète. Je lui parle. Je lui téléphone. Je lui dis la vérité. So, in that sentence, je lui achète des fleurs, the lui bit can actually mean for him, for her, or to him, or to her, right? So it can replace à lui, à elle, pour lui, pour elle. But if you're buying something for someone, you can replace the pour Michel, pour Sarah, pour Stéphane with lui, right? But the lui pronoun needs to go before your verb. So generally you would buy something for someone, or you could do something for someone, or you could make something for someone, or you would cook for someone. So you need to start thinking about the verbs that you're using and the pronoun that you're using with it. So it might be him, her, us, them, that kind of thing. And whether you're using it with the preposition à or pour. Okay, so let's have a look at some other examples. Écoutez. Here are some examples, and I'll give you, these are actually on your handout. So I'll go through some of the random examples and then I'll write down the shortened form. So, okay. Christine parle à toi. Christine parle à toi. Ok, donc le nom Christine, c'est le nom d'une femme. Christine, qu'est-ce qu'elle fait Christine? Elle parle, she's speaking. Who's she speaking to? Elle parle à toi. So that toi is referring to someone in the to form. So that's you, to you, in the informal to form. So if Christine is speaking to you, informal to, elle te parle. Christine te parle. So the te in that sentence, Christine te parle, is replacing à toi. So if you were saying that in the long form without the indirect object pronoun, there, you would say elle or Christine parle à toi. Okay. What about, okay, this one's actually in the passé composé. J'ai donné les papiers à Jean. J'ai donné les papiers à Jean. J'ai donné les papiers à Jean. I gave the papers to Jean. I gave to him papers. Okay, that's the bit that we need. So to him, we're going to replace à lui with the pronoun, the indirect object pronoun lui. So I gave to him. So I gave, j'ai donné. Let me show you how this works. J'ai donné. So that's the verb, the conjugated verb donner in the je form, passé composé. So the whole verb bit here is the et from avoir and the past participle of donner. Okay, and je here is abbreviated with an apostrophe because it's followed by a verb that begins with a vowel, right? So the je bit is the subject pronoun je for I. I have given. So what was the rest? Les papiers, papers, à Jean. Okay, so that bit there with the line underneath it is the bit that we're replacing. J'ai donné les papiers à Jean. So we can get rid of the à Jean bit. Okay. And then we need the to him, which is lui. But where do we put it? So it has to come before the conjugated verb. So the conjugated verb here is this whole thing. Okay, so I need to put lui before the est donné. Je lui ai donné les papiers. Now, because this started off with the e missing and then the apostrophe, because we're putting the pronoun that replaces to him before the verb phrase, we have to put the e back in there. Je lui ai donné les papiers. Je lui ai donné les papiers. So let me write that in the full form so you can see it. Je lui ai donné les papiers. I to him gave the papers. Okay? Now, if you were just reading that sentence, it could mean I gave to her the papers. Lui replaces either à lui or à elle. Okay, so it can be either I gave to him or I gave to her. Now, that third person to him, to her thing is the one that's different in the in the direct object pronouns versus the indirect object pronouns. So, direct object pronouns would replace it or him, her. So it would either be le or la, depending on the gender of the thing that you're replacing. Like, I watch the TV, I watch it. La télévision, je la regarde, for example. I'm looking for the pen. Je cherche le stylo could become je le cherche, because c'est le stylo, c'est masculin. So le or la is different. That's the third person of the direct object pronouns. Indirect object pronouns, it doesn't replace a thing necessarily. It's more likely to replace a person, but it's à lui or à elle, to him or to her. So the bit that makes it indirect really is the fact that between the verb and the pronoun, so like the person, there's the preposition à. So je lui ai donné les papiers in its full form. Like if you've forgotten how to say I to him give the papers, I to her give the papers, just use the full form. J'ai donné les papiers à lui or à elle. Okay? Voilà. Now let's have a think. Another example. Okay, here's one with a word that you may or may not be familiar with. Tu écris un courriel à Sophie. Tu écris, that could be shortened down to t'écris if you want, but tu écris un courriel à Sophie. Tu écris un courriel à Sophie. So, qu'est-ce que c'est un courriel? Un courriel. So, un courriel is another word for an email, right? Like, look the word up. It's something that gets sent. So, un courriel. Tu écris un courriel à Sophie. Right, so now we have à plus a girl's name. Right, so if you wanted to shorten this, you could use an indirect object pronoun which replaces to him or to her. So, à Sophie, which is the one we need? C'est ça. Lui. Okay, so tu écris un courriel à Sophie. Sorry about the reflection there. Where is it that we're going to put the lui? First of all, we get rid of à Sophie. Oh, excuse-moi, à Sophie là. On va la mettre là. Ok. Tu lui écris un courriel. You to her write an email. Bravo. Okay, so let's see. Okay, here's one. Marie donne le document à moi. Marie donne le document à moi. À moi. So, what's the pronoun that can replace to me? À moi. Me. Okay, excellent. I wonder if you can do this without writing it down. Marie donne le document à moi. So we're getting rid of the à moi, which leaves Marie donne le document. Now we need to put the me, which replaces à moi, in front of the conjugated verb. So Marie donne le document. Donne is the verb. Marie me donne le document. Marie me donne le document. C'est parfait. Bravo. Okay, so let's have a little look at some of the verbs that are used with these pronouns. Right, so one thing to mention, we haven't really looked at it much, is this leur. Let's look at that first. So leur replaces to them, à eux. So it's quite difficult to say. You might not have seen it before. It also looks like the possessive pronoun, which means theirs. Okay, so you will see that with a different grammatical function. For example, c'est leur voiture. It's their car. Ce sont leurs enfants. These are their children. Sometimes you'll see that with an S, and it means their, as in T-H-E-I-R, or theirs. It's theirs, okay? However, here it means to them. So let me see, with a different verb that we haven't used yet, maybe. Let's have a think. We're going to use the verb offrir. Offrir, because it's used more in English than it actually is in the same sense in English. It's used more in French than it is in the same sense in English. So j'offre. J'offre. This is an IR verb. J'offre. What am I offering? Du gâteau. Some cake. J'offre du gâteau à eux. Oh, this is a difficult sentence to say. J'offre du gâteau à eux. So the à eux bit, you may not have seen that anyway, that's the way that you say them. À eux, to them. I am offering some cake. J'offre du gâteau à eux. Now we're going to say I to them offer some cake. So this is the verb to offer. This is hard to do without actually just looking at it in front of me. So j'offre needs to become je, and then offre, we leave a space between the two. Okay, and then what are we going to put in the middle? Je, and then offre. The reason I do that is because we need to put the indirect object pronoun here. So if you're replacing to them, you use leur. Je leur offre du gâteau. Now we don't need the à eux because it's already taken care of with the je leur offre du gâteau. Okay, du gâteau. Je leur offre du gâteau. I offer to them some cake. Very nice. Okay, so some of the verbs that are used with indirect object pronouns. So I'm just going to write these down and check that you know what they mean, and then I'll give you some examples. Ok, donc nous avons vu demander. Oh, maybe you haven't seen that. Demander à quelqu'un de faire quelque chose. Je vous demande quelque chose. I ask something to you. To ask. I'm not going to write down the English because you can just look them up, or you can look at the handout I've given you. Donner à quelqu'un, to give to someone. Écrire à quelqu'un. So if you're writing a letter to someone, you would say, for example, je vous envoie, oh, excusez-moi, je vous écris une lettre. So like this, je vous, there's the indirect object pronoun, that means I to you write, écris une lettre. So the other way of saying this is j'écris une lettre à vous. Je vous écris une lettre. Kind of makes more sense to say it that way. Je, let's use the to form, okay? So if you're replacing à toi, like I'm sending something to you or I'm speaking to you, je te parle. I to you am speaking. So the long way of saying that is je parle à toi. So what are things making noise? Right, next video I'll have to take these things off. Let's have a look. I can't think of an example with demander. Let's look at another verb. Demander, donner à, écrire à. envoyer à. Okay, that means to send something to. So think of an envoy, if you like. Envoy. Let's have a look. Montrer. Montrer à. To send. Oh, sorry, to show something to. Je vous montre le tableau blanc. I to you show the whiteboard. Ah oui. So here's one I mentioned before. Let's just go at there. Offrir. Offer to someone. Je vous offre un café. I to you offer a coffee. Or vous nous offrez un café. Vous nous offrez. So the nous means à nous. So you to us offer a coffee. Okay, let's see. Offrir à. Ah oui, parler à. We've already had that one. Parler à. And then raconter or dire. I'll just write dire down here. Dire à. So let's look at that last one. So if we wanted to say tell that, so dire can mean to tell to someone, or to say to someone. So if we're saying tell them, we'll use the vous form. You guys tell them the truth. You guys tell them the truth. Right? So we can either say, first of all, you need to use the verb dire in the vous form, which is dites. Right, like that. Dites. Then we need the word for the truth, which is la vérité. Dites la vérité is like tell the truth. But if you're saying tell to them the truth, do you remember what it was? To them? Leur. So, dites leur la vérité. Dites-leur la vérité. Now, in the examples we had before, I said to put the pronoun that replaces to someone in front of the verb. So what's different here? Dites-leur la vérité. Yeah, that exclamation should give it away. It's a command, it's an order, it's the imperative. Tell them the truth is telling someone to do something. So when you have an imperative, you take the imperative version or form of the verb, and then you put the pronoun afterwards. So like in English, tell them the truth. Tell to them the truth. Dites la vérité à eux. Dites-leur la vérité. Dites-moi. Let me just think. Trying to think of another example. Okay. Téléphonez-nous. Téléphonez-nous. So telephone us. Téléphoner in the vous form, nous, which means à nous. Okay? So in the imperative form, you just put the pronoun after the imperative form of the verb. There's another thing that you should know about, and that's when you have modal verbs. So like a modal verb that's conjugated plus an infinitive verb. So if you look at a piece of paper that's actually empty. Voilà. So this is mentioned on the handout. So a modal verb is like pouvoir, or devoir, or what's the other one? Pouvoir, devoir, savoir. Okay? Savoir. Je peux, je dois. Something's wrong here. I have to. There's another verb. Hang on a minute. Why can't I remember the French modal verbs? French modal verbs. Sometimes I just like forget obvious stuff. So there's another. Ah oui, excusez-moi. C'est vouloir. Vouloir. Ignore that. C'est vouloir. So let's have a look where you place these pronouns when you're using a modal verb. So let's see. Je je dois, right, that's the verb to have to. Je dois vous dire quelque chose. Right, so there's the pronoun which replaces à vous. I have to tell to you something. Je dois te dire quelque chose. Now, in that sentence, you could replace the vous with any of the other indirect object pronouns. It wouldn't make sense necessarily if you say, I have to tell me something. It doesn't make sense, but you can replace it with any indirect object pronoun that does make sense. So, vous, meaning à vous, could be replaced with the to form, which replaces à toi. Do you remember what that is? So you're talking to like a family member or a friend. I have to tell to you the truth, or quelque chose, or whatever it is you're saying. Okay, so it could be je dois te dire la vérité, par exemple, the truth. I think vérité might have a second accent. Accent aigu là. So te means à toi, and that goes between the modal verb and the infinitive. So let's think of another one. Okay, let's use the verb vouloir. Je veux te montrer ma voiture, par exemple. Let's use this because it's a bit easier. Je veux, so there we have a conjugated modal verb. I want. What do I want? I want to show you the car. Je veux te montrer. So we have the full verb montrer, which means to show. And then we have the modal verb, I want, conjugated. And then here we have the indirect object pronoun, which means to you. Je veux te montrer la voiture. Okay, so that te means à toi. What if we wanted to show them the car? Show the car to them. Then we would need the pronoun that replaces to them, which is leur. Okay? So let's see. Je veux leur montrer la voiture. I want them to show the car. What if we want to show him the car? Je veux lui montrer la voiture. What if I want to show the car to her? Yeah, it's the same pronoun, whether it's to him or to her. Excellent. Okay, now let's just go back and recap over these. So for my club members, I'm going to be sending you a handout which will have a link to some online exercises for indirect object pronouns, but you need to remember that they're used with certain verbs which are followed by a preposition. So, for example, parler à quelqu'un, to speak to someone. Envoyer quelque chose à quelqu'un, to send something to someone. To show something to someone. Montrer quelque chose à quelqu'un. So the bit that you're replacing is the to someone. Okay? À moi, par exemple. À vous. À nous. À eux. À lui. À elle. À toi. Okay? So you need to remember that indirect object pronouns in French look like this. They're the same as the direct object pronouns apart from the third person singular and plural, lui and leur. The lui can replace both to him and to her. Okay, it's the same word. Leur also, it means to them, but you can see that word as a possessive pronoun, which means their, as in their car, their house. So don't be surprised if you see the same word and it means something else or it functions differently. Generally you see indirect object pronouns in front of a verb, so a conjugated verb like je te dis quelque chose. I'm telling you something. I to you tell. Je lui téléphone. I call or I telephone to him or to her. Il nous parle lentement. He to us speaks slowly. Okay? You might see it or you might hear it placed in a different part of the sentence. If it's after a verb, then it's probably an imperative. If it's between two verbs, it maybe is being used between a modal verb and an infinitive. Je veux vous dire quelque chose. Je veux vous dire. Okay? Conjugated modal verb, indirect object pronoun, infinitive verb. What else can I tell you about it? Yeah, and the main thing is it's used to replace à quelqu'un, à moi, à vous, à toi, etc. But sometimes it can also be used to replace pour quelqu'un. Okay? J'achète quelque chose pour Marie. Je lui achète quelque chose. Okay? So, I hope that's not too confusing. It is a confusing topic, and it's not the swiftest video I've ever made, but if you have any questions, just leave them below in the comments, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. I'll be in touch. Je vous enverrai le document par email, par courriel, et je vous parlerai bientôt. Merci. Au revoir.